Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Hashtag Anxiety Podcast. I'm Cassie Gaub.
Hi, I'm LolaB. We're happy you're here.
We're so happy you're here. If you haven't been here before, our disclaimers are sometimes we use very colorful language, and neither of us are licensed clinical professionals. So if you need any extra support, please make sure you are getting the support that you need. LolaB, I'm really excited about today and a little anxious.
Yeah, which makes total sense. So for our listeners, Cassie has a story to tell, and I don't know the story. We've been friends for a lot of years, and I don't know this story. So I'm learning it as our listeners are learning it, and ready, set, go. I'm ready. I'm ready.
So before I get started, I have a couple questions for you. One, do you know what a bronie is?
No. Is it an Urban Dictionary thing?
I feel like I need to figure out how to do video editing a little better so I can make the more you know, that little dun 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 sound. So a bronie is a grown man who loves My Little Ponies. It is a whole thing.
Excuse me?
Convention.
Excuse me?
It's a real thing. There is a documentary. It was on Netflix. I'm not sure if it's still up. I think it's just called Bronies. Highly recommend it because it's weird and fascinating.
Yeah, no shame in the game. I just didn't know. I didn't know.
Everybody has their flavor. It's an interesting thing. Okay, so my second question. What do bronies, antique French furniture, Komodo dragons, vials of blood, and me have in common?
Wow. Vials of blood is the only thing that I know about. And that to me says Billy Bob Thornton and Angelina Jolie. But what they have to do with you, I can't wait to find out.
Yeah. So the common thread is Billy Bob Thornton. And if anyone is older or younger than us, in the 90s, I want to say, Billy Bob Thornton did wear Angelina Jolie's blood in a vial around his neck. He's a little eccentric.
And she wore his.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
It was a double thing. Yeah. It was a weird time, the 90s.
It's still a weird time.
It's true. So Billy Bob Thornton, that is what we are talking about today and who we are talking about today. And how I fit into this is, no, I'm not a famous actress, unfortunately. And
you should be.
I should be. I've been saying that forever. Like somebody should just pay me to read a few lines. And
right. I'm sorry I interrupted. I'm so nervous. I'm a little nervous about what you're going to say. Okay, I'm ready.
Is it because I mentioned bronies?
Yes, you led with that, and it's reeling. It's just racing through my mind, but I'll try and settle in.
I wanted to kick us off with something that would cause everybody anxiety.
Well, you've accomplished that, I'm pretty sure.
Grown men who love My Little Ponies. What more could you be anxious about?
Oh my gosh.
So I'm going to tie it all together. If you don't know, Billy Bob Thornton is an actor. He's quite handsome. He gets better looking with age. He's a little bit eccentric. He also has OCD, which is how I realized I have OCD. So when I was a teenager, I always had this weird thing going on, and I knew I was different from everyone else, and people didn't obsessively worry that the stove was left on or have all these weird racing thoughts like, did I run somebody over when I was driving today? You'd think I'd notice, but did I have these crazy thoughts all the time? And I would never talk about it because I knew it was weird.
Yeah.
And so it was on MTV, back when MTV was a thing.
When they played music videos?
When they played music and had some cool interviews. It might have been VH1, one of those things. I was watching an interview with Billy Bob Thornton, and he started talking about his OCD. And the thing he highlighted in this interview was how he counted, which is something that I used to always do. I still do occasionally, but I would usually count to 12 or 16. And he was saying, I'd always have these things in my head. I count the stairs and I do this. And he was very laissez-faire about it. And I thought, oh my God, that is what I have. And this is when the internet was new because, people, I'm an old. So the internet was brand new. We had the dial-up internet on our shared family computer. So I frantically ran upstairs, Googled obsessive compulsive disorder. And that is how Billy Bob Thornton essentially changed the course of my life. So,
wow.
Yeah. He doesn't know it. I thought about reaching out to his reps and being like, do you want to be on this podcast? But
I think you should. We have nothing to lose by trying. I think we
nothing to
should.
lose. My anxiety got in the way.
Wow.
But yeah, so I
Was
often joke that Billy Bob Thornton, changed my life. He doesn't know it yet, but
he diagnosed your OCD?
I know.
So did he talk more about things than just counting?
Yes. So he also has a weird obsession or fear of antique, I believe, like French furniture. So he talks about it. I think he did an interview with Oprah where he went into that a little bit more. Komodo dragons. He has a list of things that he like obsessively is weird about.
Those things give him anxiety?
They give him anxiety. He his OCD manifests in a few different ways. So
Okay.
some of his fears, like his fear of the antique furniture, isn't necessarily part of his OCD, but definitely part of his anxiety. The counting is part of his OCD.
Right.
He does a lot of repetitive behavior. So that's really how his OCD manifests a little bit more, and kind of how he helped me to realize, oh, that's what I have. And I could talk about it and I could not be as weird about it or stressed about it. Like, oh, I got this thing. It just is what it is. And I check the stove a million times before I go to bed. But you know what? My house is never going to burn down because of of the stove fire.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So he normalized it for you in a way.
He normalized it for me. The most eccentric guy at that time in Hollywood made something normal for me.
Yeah.
So that's
a gift.
And he is a bronie, which is how bronies tie into this. I just recently learned
he's a bronie. Like, he's not afraid of it. He's not anxious about it. It's not OCD. He loves My Little Pony.
He loves My Little Pony.
I love that for him.
Yeah.
That
it just makes him more
I don't
lovable.
know. Yeah, I was just gonna say, it feels like he's got maybe a soft, tender heart, and I find that interesting on 1,000 different levels. But certainly one of them, it ties into all the things I have thought about those of us who are highly anxious and highly sensitive. We have really soft hearts. Mm-hmm. I feel like that's kind of a common theme. And it's like Dr. Hawkins was talking about last week about being a turtle, mm-hmm. and harm avoidant and going into your shell because you don't want to get hurt. Well, it's because we're protecting our tender hearts. So the fact that he digs My Little Pony, to me, makes it sound like he's got a tender heart. He has a sweetness about him, at least in that way. So, wow. So after you kind of figured that out, then how did your life change or evolve? I mean, clearly you said you felt like, hey, I'm not the only one. That's a huge thing. But did you do anything to make changes or to embrace it or to explore your OCD further because of that?
Yeah, I think there's definitely some power in just putting a name to it. So once I got a name for it and I had something to like grasp onto and learn more about, that made a huge difference for me. And hopefully this podcast also helps people realize, like, you are not the only one, because that also made a huge difference. Like you said, knowing that, oh, I'm not the only one that is this flavor of crazy. So that was really helpful. And thankfully with the internet, I was able to learn a lot more kind of about just what I was experiencing and some things to do that might help. When I was younger, most of those things didn't help because I was just a stressed out, angsty teenager, which didn't help, right?
And you're trying to do it on your own, right? You at this point hadn't really said much to your family, or you didn't have support. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there was two people, my cousin and my sister, both kind of noticed and knew things, and they just were like, oh, it's just your weirdness. But we didn't really ever talk about it. My mom didn't know until I was married, moved out of the house, like late 20s. So we never talked about it until at that point. But I did a lot of research on my own. And the fascinating thing about OCD, and I'm not an expert by any means, other than like how I experience it. So there's so many different things. I think I've mentioned this before, when you hear OCD, you think, oh, you just wash your hands all the time and are afraid of germs. But that is only one way OCD manifests. I'm not that person at all, other than when it comes to touching raw meat. I'm not a fan. I don't like the texture of it. I wear gloves all the time, but that's not an OCD thing. It's a preference.
Right.
But I do count and check things a lot, which is sometimes how OCD will manifest. There's something called harm OCD. And that's kind of that fear of, oh my God, did I run somebody over?
Yeah.
So I'd sometimes like drive around the block just to make sure like there wasn't some body laying on the street that I ran over somehow and didn't notice. And I've even seen there's some shows on TV, and I don't know if they're on TV anymore. I don't remember what they're called exactly, but where they're they will let therapists into like a session with them. So there's shows that go around kind of that level of OCD. And I remember seeing, this has been so many years ago, but it was a session with somebody who had harm OCD and was so worried she was going to harm her therapist and would have this reoccurring thought that she would like stab her therapist with a knife, and like would have this thought over and over and over again, and obviously had no intention of ever harming her therapist. And so they did something called exposure therapy, where they had this person bring a knife into the session and had it sit on the table and had the client like hold the knife just to like prove to herself that she wasn't actually going to do any of these things. And the therapist obviously was well trained, it was an expert in working with this type of OCD, so she also knew she wasn't in any danger.
Right.
But these thoughts can become like so overpowering, where it just is on a loop and repeat, where the logic of things doesn't always kick in. And that's how one way OCD can manifest. So I've had that a little bit. I feel like I had that more when I was younger. I don't necessarily have that it doesn't manifest that way for me now.
I have a friend, it's been a number of years ago, it's someone that I worked with, and she had OCD and she ended up taking medication for it at some point. She said because it got to the point where it interfered with her life. And she put it this way, she was also a checker. She would check things, and she said, I couldn't get out the door. I couldn't get out the door in the morning. And she's like, I gotta freaking go to work. I have things I need to do. And it was interfering in her life in that way. But medication was really effective for her, for it to just temper that down. I mean, she didn't completely make it go away, but it made it so she could check 5 times instead of 1,000 times and be able to get out the door and live her life. And I love that. It's like she knew what she needed to do. I think there are a lot of people who have some OCD tendencies, but I think there aren't as many of those who it interferes with their life where they can't get out the door. And that would be really stressful.
Yeah.
I would think.
We've talked about how I've not been formally diagnosed. I've self-diagnosed.
Right.
And I always say, no, I'm just OC, not OCD, because I'm not necessarily disordered. I don't think. I can get out of the house. I can function. There was a period of my life when I was in college and I was taking 18 credits and I had 3 jobs. Like I was a mess. I had no sleep. It was ridiculous. And so obviously lack of sleep is one of the things that triggers my anxiety, which makes my OCD behaviors worse. So there was a point in college where I also took medication because I couldn't leave the house. I was checking things so much, or I couldn't go to bed because I was getting up to check the door so many times. So I did take medication for a while and it was amazing. I had a great response and it wasn't something that I needed long term. I got to a point where I set some better boundaries for myself and I calmed my life down a little bit, where I wanted to try getting off the medication and try things again. And I was able to manage it at that point.
Is that the period where you feel like you kind of started to hone your skills for your sleep hygiene? Because we talked about your sleep hygiene, that it rocks. So was that a big piece of you being able to feel like you could be more in control?
Yeah, I definitely noticed, especially during that time when getting off medication, I noticed if my sleep was off, that my OCD was so much worse and I was so much more anxious and it was so much harder for me to function in life and took so much more energy. I think, well, I guess I don't know, but people without anxiety, people without OCD, I don't know if they just go through the day and are like, it takes the same amount of energy. I don't experience that at all.
That's not how I experience it either. It's a lot of work.
Right. If I don't get enough sleep, like everything is so much harder. So, and then the anxiety is worse. So then it makes it even harder. So doing simple things like I just had to return 10 emails, like that would have been almost 4 hours worth of work versus 10 minutes worth of work.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I'm so impressed and proud of you and the work that you've done. And I think I think that's something that maybe our listeners, I hope, can take some comfort in, that, it doesn't have to be horrible. It doesn't have to be bad. There are things we can do ourselves. There are things that we need some support with, that whether that's therapy or medication or family support or whatever that may be. I think it's a journey. I mean, I know people throw that term around a lot, but it really is, it's like last week with Dr. Hawkins, where I'm like, yeah, can you cure my anxiety in this session today? That would be really helpful. That's just not how that goes. And it's not how it goes with OCD, and it's all tied together. But I'm so proud of you for, not that you need me to be proud of you, but I am proud of you that you did what you needed to do to take care of yourself and to feel better and to walk the earth in a more peaceful way. That just warms my heart. I'm so happy for you and
Thank you. It's all
proud
thanks
of your
to
work.
my brony friend, Billy Bob Thornton.
Well, you have people who support you and who you
Yeah.
feel comfortable with to share your story and heal, really. And I'm gonna die an anxious person, right? That's just how that's gonna go. I hope I manage it as best I can and still have joy in my life. That's really my goal, is to continue to live my life and have joy. And like you said, people, a safe space where you can share your difficulties and have some laughs about it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Cassie, for sharing your story today. That was interesting. I can't believe I've known you all these years and didn't know that story.
My love of Billy Bob Thornton. It's a real thing.
All right, my friend. Thanks so much for talking today.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. Remember to share your anxiety of the week with us. Tag us on Instagram at #anxietypodcast.
We'll see you soon. Bye, everybody. Be well.
Bye.